Welcome to The Shift Show with Adriana Bucci. Join me every week to learn all about narcissistic abuse recovery, healing from physical and emotional pain after the abuse, and everything else to do with toxic people and how they affect your physical, emotional, and mental health. And no, you are not the crazy one. Thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode. Let's get right to it. Welcome to episode number 6 of The Shift Show. Today I'm going to be talking all about chronic pain and what this has to do with being raised by a narcissist and going through narcissistic abuse in general. So if you heard my first episode, the introduction episode, you will know that I had a disastrous amount of chronic pain. It started with my jaw in 2015 when I got a regular wisdom tooth extraction, ended up with dry sockets, and ended up with TMJ. TMJ is temporomandibular joint dysfunction, and that joint is the joint that connects your upper and lower jaw on your face. So I was suffering from migraines for a solid 4 years, and before that, I did have random mystery symptoms. So pretty much my entire life, I would have vertigo, I would have random bouts of nausea. I thought I was allergic to gluten for 3 years. I thought I was lactose intolerant. I thought I had some sort of stomach issues. There was always something going on with my body. And if it wasn't some sort of stomach problem, it was some form of pain. And I was very accident prone as a child. I sprained my knees several times, and my knees would hurt later in adult life, and I would just connect it back to these old injuries. And there was one time when I was 17, I fell off a ladder. I messed up my upper back a little bit, the soft tissue damage, and I would have all this weird pain in my upper back for years, but it wasn't that bad, so I kind of suffered through it and, just kind of lived with it. And I just figured that when you injure yourself in general, you end up having pain after that. And I thought that was just kind of a normal part of life and the aging process. And anytime you do injure yourself, you damage your body somewhat, and that's just how you're going to be until you die. So that was kind of the opinion that I had about just how the human body kind of works. And so when I messed up my jaw from this wisdom tooth extraction, I pretty much just accepted the fact that I would be doomed for life with these migraines, and it really sucked. And things just kind of escalated and got worse and worse from 2015 to 2019. I ended up with neck kyphosis, which is like the discs kind of are degenerating and fusing and like going into the wrong direction, like the curve goes wrong. That's the best way I can describe it. I'm not going to read whatever my x-ray says because there's a lot of big words that I am not a doctor and I don't really understand, but my understanding of it is that my neck was messed up essentially, and this was because of my jaw. Then I got carpal tunnel. I had surgery on one hand, and my other hand was starting to go as well because I was only using my good hand, and then I figured that that was just normal because I was repetitively straining my good hand because my carpal tunnel hand was basically useless. I had no grip. I remember I even shattered a jar in a store because I didn't feel it slipping out of my hand. So I was pretty messed up physically, and I had tendonitis on both of my elbows. And eventually by October of 2018, I had been getting a treatment on my jaw, and this was a very invasive kind of treatment, and at least it wasn't surgery, but I feel like the surgery may have been more pleasant because this was just like such a long process that I had to go through. So from March 2018, I had a splint in my mouth, and it was removable. But this splint essentially was widening my upper jaw to make room for my lower jaw to fit, because apparently that was what was causing me to have all this pain and these migraines. And it was the wisdom tooth extraction from 2015 that triggered the pain to continue to happen. So my understanding of it was that my wisdom teeth gave my jaw some leverage back then. And because those teeth were now missing, everything in my jaw was misaligned, and this was why I was having the migraines. This was why I was grinding my teeth at night. This was why any sort of face pain that I was experiencing, it was all because of this wisdom tooth extraction. So I was deeply regretting having that wisdom tooth extraction done for 3 years prior. And yeah, like it was just such a nightmare, really. So in March, I decided to start this ridiculous treatment with a TMJ specialist. And I had perfect teeth. So you got to understand that I'm a little vain, and I had perfect teeth at this time in my life because I had braces when I was 10 years old up until the age of 12 years old. And my teeth were just like absolutely perfect. Some people would argue that my teeth are still perfect now. They do aesthetically look perfect, but there are some little gaps, and it is really annoying because of the movement that happened in my jaw from the splint treatment. So I'll get into that later. So basically, this was going on, and that treatment was so painful too because it was altering my skull, essentially. And I was getting all this vertigo from it and just like tingling in my arms. Like it was wild. Like it was quite the ride. So by in August, I got braces to, fix all the gaps that this splint caused. And I knew I was in for like 2 years of having braces, and I was 30 years old at this time. So that was really hard for me because I had perfect teeth, and now here I am with braces. Sure enough, they were the clear ones, but I still saw them. It wasn't the Invisalign ones, it was the brackets that were clear, so you could still see like the wire. I couldn't smile in photos anymore. I was super self-conscious about it. So not only was this physically annoying and causing me to have pain, it was also like mentally bothering me because I looked different. And it was hard for me to accept how I looked with this crap in my mouth. I basically had this cage in my mouth. And so yeah, by August 2018, I got the braces on, and I experienced a solid 2 weeks of vertigo. So that's just constant dizziness. I had to take a couple days off of work because I couldn't drive. And they didn't change my first wire until October because I was just very sensitive to the braces treatment. And then they also put this other appliance on the roof of my mouth with the braces that would continue reshaping my face. And in October, I got the first wire changed, and a week later, I experienced the absolute worst pain of my life. So I thought I had already been through the worst pain of my life, but no. This was next level. So I thought I was getting a next level migraine. Turns out that migraine that lasted for 5 weeks, the first 3 days of it leading up to random cuts on the roof of my mouth ended up being shingles in my mouth. So if anyone doesn't know, shingles is the chickenpox virus, and it can reignite in your system. If you have had chickenpox at all, it just kind of stays dormant in your spinal cord, and it can come back at any time, but it usually happens when somebody is a senior citizen, and it's pretty rare, but it happened to me at age 30 for the second time. I actually had shingles when I was 23 also, and that was on my lower back, and it was really bad, and I thought that was really painful, but when it's in your mouth, it is so much worse. So I couldn't eat for 5 weeks. I was ugly crying every day, and because of all the pain, and yeah, I just was losing my mind completely at this point because I have braces, my jaw's being realigned, that's already painful, and now I have shingles in my mouth. And it's pretty rare to get shingles in your mouth, but it happened to me, of course. So the nerve that got affected by the shingles is my trigeminal nerve. So this is a nerve that branches into 3 parts on your face and side of your head. So it kind of branches on your temple area, into your eyebrow area, under your cheek, and then underneath your jaw. So when somebody ends up with pain in this nerve, it is called trigeminal neuralgia. It's also nicknamed the suicide disease because it is so painful that you just kind of want to not live anymore. And I can attest to how painful it is because I definitely had those thoughts while I was experiencing this pain. And I got to a point where I just did not know if the pain was ever going to go away. And after the 5 weeks, so shingles lasts about 5 weeks when you get the rash, and the pain's supposed to go away. It didn't. So I still had this searing pain on the side of my face and head. And my best way to describe this pain, it's a little graphic because that's how bad it is somebody's pouring acid on the side of your face whilst setting you on fire at the same time, and you're being hit by jolts of electricity all simultaneously. That is the best words that I can possibly put the pain of trigeminal neuralgia during and after shingles into words. So I was losing my mind. And it was not until January of 2019, after 4 years of suffering, after being at my final straw in pain, where I stumbled upon the mind-body connection. Now, I was doing everything to manage the pain. I was going to the chiropractor, I was getting acupuncture, I was taking supplements, I was seeing a nutritionist. I went to my family doctor, obviously, before any of these other alternative therapies because I was very big into like science and doctors and all that kind of stuff, obviously. I still am. And, they gave me Lyrica, which is a nerve pain medication, and that kind of dialed down the volume of the pain a little bit, but then I would build up a tolerance and then I would be in more pain. And the problem with me taking painkillers at that point was that I was taking so many painkillers throughout those 4 years with my jaw and everything that I was actually developing ulcers. So I had this paranoia of taking painkillers because I couldn't really take any because the lining in my stomach was also going to hell. And it was just so frustrating. And I couldn't have alcohol either because that would have been a great way for me to numb the pain as well because, you drink, have a few drinks, you feel a little better. But I couldn't do that because of my stomach lining. And I couldn't smoke anything that would help me either because the pain was in my mouth. So I was losing it. Like I had no real options. And when I would go to the acupuncturist, I'd get a little bit of relief, but then it would always come back like the next day or a few days later if I was lucky. I also resorted to getting nerve block injections in my face. So this is an injection that goes in your face, like wherever you're feeling pain, and it kind of does a little reset on the nerve. So I was doing that once a week, and it was extremely inconvenient because I had to take time off of work, and it was on the other side of the world. Like it was a solid 40-minute drive for me to get to the clinic that offered this, and it wouldn't last very long, and it was very hit and miss how long it would last. So sometimes I'd be lucky and it would last a week, and sometimes I would be unlucky and it would just not work at all. And when it lasted, it didn't take the pain away completely. So this is just a bit of a summary of kind of what I went through. And so by January 2019, I literally had no more options left. I didn't know what the hell else to do here. I tried everything. I ran out of options. I just didn't know at this point what to do short of, jumping into oncoming traffic at this point. I just did not know how to make the pain go away. And there was no light at the end of the tunnel. I just couldn't see this pain going away because it wasn't going away. And I was starting to worry that it would last forever. My doctor sent me to a neurologist, but I couldn't get the appointment for 16 to 18 months. So I ended up never going because that was a very long time to wait. And just the idea of me being in that much pain for 16 to 18 months was just absurd to me. But I was looking into the treatments for trigeminal neuralgia, and one of them is basically a brain surgery where they just sever your nerve in your face from your brain, so you just don't have any feeling on the side of your face. And I was okay with this. Like, I was totally on board with this solution. Like, I would have done it if I did not come across the mind-body connection. So that's just kind of how desperate I was at that time. So January 2019, I'm scrolling on Instagram, looking at like Facebook or something, and I see this ad for an app called Curable. If you are in any type of chronic pain, I would highly, highly recommend downloading this app and getting the subscription for it, because this app completely changed my life. I will add a link to it in the description of this episode. So I went into my journey with this Curable app with extreme skepticism. I didn't think it was going to work because nothing else worked. And I was actually offended when I came across what kind of work I would have to do in this app. So essentially, it was saying that my childhood trauma that I experienced as a child caused me to have repressed emotions. And those repressed emotions are what are causing me to be in pain. So I was pissed when I first found out about this and learned about this, because I figured I had no emotions. I was one of those people. I was very stoic, very proud to have no emotions. I didn't show any emotion whatsoever in general. Like, I didn't even cry at my wedding, even though I was happy. I just did not show emotions. And I, of course, didn't have emotions because they were all repressed, and I had no idea that they were repressed. So just hearing about this concept truly offended me. So I did not use the app that day that I downloaded it. I was just pissed off. I decided to ignore it, and sure enough, the next day I was still in pain. So I decided, you know what? Let's just try this out. Like, I didn't care anymore at that point. And I decided that I'm just going to open this app, do it with all the resistance that I had, and I just didn't care anymore at this point, because it was like a life and death situation at this point for me. Like, I was in so much pain. I had no other options, and I'm going to try this stupid thing that I don't believe in because it just sounds so stupid. And whatever, let's just try it out and see what happens. So I tried it, and I kept doing it. Like the app told me to, like 3 exercises per week, whatever. The first week that I did this, I actually noticed a 5 to 10% reduction in my pain levels. So I was kind of thinking like, all right, I guess there is something to it. And by the second week, I experienced my first 5 minutes of no pain. So for somebody who's been in pain for such a long time, those 5 minutes were all I needed to continue doing this emotional work and releasing these repressed emotions. Like, I just couldn't understand, like, when I didn't have the pain, it was almost like I thought I was dead, because I literally had no pain for those solid 5 minutes, and I was so happy. And I just thought, you know what, if I could hold on to this lack of pain and have even 10 minutes of this, then that is worth it to keep going. So I kept going, and by April, I was pain-free. And yeah, I have relapses every now and again. I still feel pain. There's human pain, of course, It's normal to stub your toe and you're going to feel pain, because that's normal. But it's not chronic. And when the pain does last, because sometimes I will get pain in my jaw, but I know that that is because I have to release a repressed emotion, and it does not last nearly as long as it did before. And just the fact that I can actually have control over my pain levels is the most awesome thing ever. So I'm going to talk a bit more about this, and I think I'm going to have to do more episodes on this mind-body connection, because there is just so much that I can say about this, and I don't want to be having 1.5 hour long podcast episodes. So I will just start with, I'll continue this with talking about Dr. John Sarno. So Dr. John Sarno is the doctor from the United States who coined the term tension myositis syndrome. This is also known as mind-body syndrome. And it's literally exactly what I just described in the story that I had about my chronic pain being completely cured by releasing my trapped emotions. So essentially, he had a family practice and he had a bunch of patients who had back pain. Some of them had bulging discs, some of them had slightly bulging discs, some of them had degenerating discs, some of them had perfectly normal spines, but they still had back pain. So they did a study about back pain. They did MRIs on random people who did not have any back pain at all. And they also saw that some of these people had bulging discs, some of them worse than people who had symptoms. So why is that? So it's all because of childhood trauma. And Dr. Sarno is pretty much the first doctor to put it out there. A lot of other people in the medical profession dismissed him as a quack. And I mean, understandably so, because we are in a society that is a pill-popping society. You take a pill, you're feeling better in 20 minutes, and that's that. And that's the science behind it. You can't exactly measure a repressed emotion. So how do you add a metric to that? And, that is just like one of the biggest, I guess, kind of secrets in the world in general, that repressed emotions are responsible for so many issues and illnesses and chronic pain. And I mean, of course, if you have like pain and it's because of a tumor or some sort of genetic condition or something like that, that's a completely different story. But for things like chronic pain, skin conditions like eczema, acne, IBS, stomach issues, carpal tunnel syndrome, anxiety, fibromyalgia, nerve pain, neck pain, frozen shoulder, disordered eating, repetitive strain injuries, things like that, pain, stiffness, numbness, uncomfortable sensations in the body, which you've gotten checked out by your doctor and they can't really help you with the pain other than to prescribe painkillers, injections, some cases surgery, or, managing it with like a supplement or something like that. All of that can be put under this umbrella of tension myositis syndrome. And this whole concept is something that nobody teaches us in school or in society in general. So it's no wonder why it's so hard to believe. And I mean, I'm proof of that. Like, I did not believe this at first until I started doing it because I literally had no other choice. And essentially, the way that a child's brain interprets trauma is completely different than how an adult's brain would interpret trauma. And when I talk about an adult brain, I'm talking about an adult, healthy brain that has processed their trauma throughout their life. So as a child, if your emotions were dismissed or, vilified by your parents, your teachers, anybody, naturally, the child's brain will repress them because they interpret those emotions as dangerous. When the brain at that young age interprets something as dangerous, it's a life and death type of dangerous. So literally, the amygdala part of a child's brain undergoing some sort of trauma, and they cannot have emotions towards that trauma for whatever reason, however they're interpreting it. And they could have parents that are well-meaning, like, you do not have to have had narcissistic parents to have chronic pain. You could have had any type of trauma. I only talk about the narcissistic situation because that was what was true for me. So what was true for me might not be true for other people who have chronic pain. I'm not going to get into, obviously, all of the other root causes of why a child would be traumatized. So, I mean, just use your own kind of experience in your own childhood to make that connection yourself. But for me, as a child, my emotions definitely got dismissed all the time. Like, my emotions were inconvenient for my parent. And I internalized that, obviously. So if I was angry about something, that would be a massive inconvenience for my parent. So I was not allowed to feel angry. I was not allowed to feel sad. I was told to get over it, things like that. And my brain interpreted anger, sadness, excitement, joy, fear, every emotion under the sun as a dangerous life and death thing, and literally interpret it as, if I feel this emotion, I will die. Obviously, that's not true. Obviously, as an adult, I know that if I feel an emotion, I'm not going to die. But that is where all the fear came from when I first began feeling my emotions. So that is where a lot of the resistance comes from for people who are just starting this work when they are releasing their emotions. It is so scary. It is such a scary thing to do. And it's hard to wrap your head around if it's something that you've never done before. And yeah, like basically just this whole repressed emotion thing being connected to chronic pain was mind-blowing for me. And the thing is, when you're a kid, you're not consciously making the decision of, I need to repress this emotion because it's dangerous. It just happens on such a subconscious level, and it continues throughout your adulthood. It doesn't just magically stop being processed like that once you hit the age of 18. You know, like you're not conscious of the fact that you have been repressing these emotions, as I was definitely not conscious of myself. Like I just literally thought I didn't have any. And you might not even believe that you've suffered any sort of childhood trauma. And, you know, a lot of the time people think of trauma as capital T trauma, like witnessing wars as a child or witnessing abuse or being physically abused and things like that. But there is lowercase t trauma for sure. Like, and that is just like verbal abuse, you know, things like that, stuff at school, like a teacher yelling at you. It's not necessarily like you witnessed people dying in front of you as a kid, but your brain is still interpreting it as trauma. It's stuff that just shouldn't be happening. And when a child's not allowed or able to express those emotions, then that's when we run into problems later in life. And if you think about it, when you start repressing your emotions at such a young age, where do they go? They go nowhere. They stay in your body. And then over time, over the course of your life, they start building up and building up and building up. And at some point, you're going to burst. So either you're going to just completely lose your shit one day, or like me, you're going to have this horrible chronic pain that just breaks you to the point where you just don't even know if you want to be alive anymore. So you don't have to let it get to the point that I allowed it to get to, because I mean, I didn't really know about this mind-body connection until I got to that point. I don't know if I would have done any of the emotional work if I wasn't at that point. It really depends on the person. Like some people need to get to that point of extreme suffering where they will finally be open to this theory and they will finally decide that they need to start doing this work. Some people, they decide that they've had enough suffering and they're going to start doing the emotional work and start releasing those repressed emotions. And they don't get to the point that I got to. So it really just depends on the individual. I would highly recommend not getting to the point that I got to, because I mean, that really sucked. Like, to be in that much pain is just not okay at all. But again, if I knew about it sooner, could things have been different? Maybe, but we can't just think about all the what ifs. So that was my journey. That was how it happened for me. And yeah, like it all makes so much sense now that I've been through it and I did the work. It wasn't easy doing the work because I had so much fear of my emotions. Now, a year after I did the work, I mean, I still have a little fear towards emotions, but I work through that fear. And that's how you know that you've done your healing work, where you can actually get to a point where you can be triggered by something. You can acknowledge that there is an emotion in you and you know that there's work to do, and you actually do that work. Because I don't think that we ever fully heal as long as we're alive. You don't just magically get to a point where it's like, oh, I'm completely healed. I'm just like this wonderful, enlightened person and I know everything and like I never have problems in my life again. It's about getting to a point where you've done the work. You know what the work is, you have your own toolbox, and when something happens, when something triggers you, or when you feel pain, you can apply the tools in your toolbox to that situation and work through it. And if something doesn't work, you don't get discouraged. You just put another tool out there and try that, and you just keep going and going and going, and knowing that you have reached the point of no pain emotionally or physically, and that you can do it again, and that you have the power to do your own self-healing work. And this is why I coach. This is why I hold space for people to do their healing work. And there's so many different ways to do the work. I will have future episodes on this. I just wanted to kind of introduce the concept of the mind-body connection in relation to narcissistic abuse, because I am sure that many, if not all, of my listeners who have had narcissistic parents have something that they perceive as being wrong with their body, whether that is like pain or a condition that there's no real cure for, that is not life-threatening. Like I said, you've gone to your doctor, you've had all the tests done, and you know that you don't have something life-threatening like a cancer or like, you know, something that's a degenerative disease of some sort. Like, those are different stories. But when it comes to things like, you know, the chronic pain, chronic anxiety, stuff like that, like IBS, even like other types of things like fibromyalgia, things like that, these are all things that don't have a cure, and it's not really well known that the cause is repressed emotions. And as ridiculous and weird as that sounds, I can definitely vouch for it. And there's so many other podcasts that also talk about this subject. So I'll link those if you are interested in the mind-body connection. There's so many great podcasts out there that talk about this. So I will have future episodes discussing more parts of the mind-body healing journey and how it applies to narcissistic abuse. And I will stop this episode here. Tune in next week for our next episode. I will probably have something else about TMS, and there will be future episodes, obviously, about stuff to do with narcissism and the personality types. I will be having a future episode on covert narcissism and how to spot those, because they are very hard to spot and they act completely differently in behind closed doors and in public. So signs to watch out for with those types of narcissists. So I have not abandoned the subject of narcissistic abuse at all. This whole podcast is going to be like a combination of narcissistic abuse recovery with mind-body healing, because the mind and the body are the same thing. The body is a reflection of what's going on in the mind. So I hope this episode has been helpful, and I'm sure people have a lot of questions about this. Feel free to shoot me an email at letsgetyourshiftogether@gmail.com if you would like me to tackle any of your questions on a podcast episode in the future. And if you're interested in being coached by me, feel free to book a session. I'll link my booking page as well. And I also have a book called How to Get Started on Getting Your Shift Together. And this kind of goes through the steps of mind-body healing. And I am going to link that as well in the description. It's only $7 and it's a great step-by-step guide. I'm also going to be creating a course. I am just announcing this for the first time, and it's going to be a course that is based on my book. And it's going to be in a more comprehensive way, because I know when you buy a book, it is hard to keep up with the exercises in it, especially with the type of book that I have. So I think that having a course is going to make it so much more comprehensive for people to follow the teachings of the book. So I will keep everyone posted on the release date of that course. It's going to probably be a little while before I do have an actual date for that. So if anyone again has questions, feel free to shoot me an email. And I hope this episode has helped anybody who is having chronic pain to understand that there is a mind-body connection. We'll see you next week. Bye.